right, welcome back to another season of One True Podcast. I was trying to think I know it's the original Baylor football podcast. I know that much for sure. We do cover the Big 12 here too, but did we have this when you were still at the Trib, Jerry? Did we start?
Yeah, we did. I think I was in the first group that started it. And I can't remember if we started this one first or the high school one. I know we did the high school one too, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this one might have actually been the first one. It
Yeah.
was Zach, I think it was back when it was still just all black and white. That was that
You
was
had
how
to, you had
long
to like
ago.
mail it to them and like it's like a
May have
VHS
even
tape,
been before
you know?
Three Amigos. I don't know.
Hey, listen, this is the best I could do for a sombrero. This
Oh,
looks more
love
like
it.
I
this
like
looks
it.
more like El Guapo's hat, but
Oh, love it. Well, while we're on that subject, I do got to cover that real quick. I was just mortified, by the way, that so many of our younger media had never seen Three Amigos, an all-time classic comedy. But my little story there is because of Three Amigos, when I took high school Spanish, I turned to the back of the book on the very first day to the glossary because I wanted to see what guapo meant. And then I raised my hand and I said, Miss Schmidt, my Spanish name will be El Guapo.
El
And she
Guapo.
just laughed. Which, if you're not aware, it means very handsome. Uh,
Oh gosh.
yes.
False advertising.
Oh, whatever.
yeah.
With me again, of course, is our Baylor beat writer Zach Smith. Now residing in the 254.
Happy to be here.
Yep.
It's
He burned up that I-35 from Georgetown to Waco for a long time, but
I single-handedly like am funding Buc-ee's in Temple.
yes.
I bought so many burritos, it's ridiculous.
And then our special guest this week, always as John Morris would say, like a friend of the program. Is that what he says? I think. Uh,
Yeah, he says our friend, and I hope your friend, or something to that effect. I'm
love
like,
it,
okay,
love it.
okay, yeah.
But we have Jerry Hill,
Thank you.
Connect Four champion. I I
Can we get a
called it the
dance on
biggest.
here too? Like,
I called
Not
it the
on
biggest
here.
upset in
Yeah,
sports history.
I agree. I agree. That was if I had looked at that board and seen those 32 names up there, I'm not sure mine would have been last, but I would not have picked myself to win it. So
Had you
that's
been practicing?
no, gosh, no. I hadn't played it since the last time we played.
Yeah, so we had a media mixer the other night with meet local media and Baylor coaches, head coaches of various sports. Scott Drew was the defending Connect Four champion, wiped me out in the first round. I was told that was the 1 versus 16 matchup. He rope-a-dope to me, man. He was like sitting there going, "Oh, good move, good move," and then all of a sudden, blink.
Yep.
But yeah, Jerry won the thing. It was pretty incredible.
pretty
Jay
intense.
Jay Goebel and I, man, we were right there, and I mean he was like staring me down, and my ploy in every round had been you go first, and he said his was the same thing because you want to see what the other one's going to do, kind of a
Nice.
defense type thing.
Nice, yeah.
And so he kind of threw me off a little bit, but and then apparently I missed like two or three opportunities before I won it that were right there, and I missed
Yeah,
them.
I heard that David K was over there just going,
He was
going
freaking out.
nuts.
He was
Yeah,
freaking out.
yeah,
Fun times, fun
yeah.
times. And speaking of fun times, so guys, in just a few days we will have actual Baylor tackle football to watch again. Uh It is a win or bust year for Dave Aranda and the Bears after last year's disappointing 3-9 season. Aranda has not ducked the pressure, I would say, in any of his off-season remarks. I would say he's even embraced it. Um, do you think that the players have embraced that as well? And just as you guys kind of look at this program from, 30,000 feet aerial view, what do you expect from the 2024 Baylor Bears? We'll start with our special guest, Jerry Hill.
Yeah, I would say, I think particularly for ones that have been around the program, you look at like a Matt Jones, I think he's definitely embraced it, and it's his last chance. And that's kind of the way he put it was, he saw that in Aranda too. Like he saw for the first time looking in his eyes, like this is it. And for Matt Jones, this is it. So I think maybe more so for the older guys. I don't know if the younger guys, I mean, I think, surely they've heard it and all that kind of thing. I don't know that they're really all in or embraced on the pressure situation. But I think certainly for those older guys and guys that they know this is their last year, I think they realize it and I think they've embraced it. Now, did you want to go ahead and talk about like what we expect from the team? Is that what you were wanting to?
Well, sure, yeah, but
Yeah.
let me get Zach's
Yep.
take on
Yep.
that
Yep.
first question. What do you think? Do you agree with Jerry?
Yeah, I think that, you made a good point about the older guys kind of really carrying the torch for, feeling the pressure and taking the next step. But I do think that there is some pressure on the younger guys too, because
Mhm.
they were, a lot of the talk coming out of last year was that this team was so young and there were, all these freshmen playing all these snaps and all this. So like I think there is some pressure and there is some fire on underneath those younger guys like Caden Jenkins and all this that they know what losing feels like. So now they do kind of want to prove that, last year, yeah, we were freshmen, but we were freshmen playing at a higher level than high school. So like I do think that there is a good mix of that experience like Matt Jones, but I do think that the freshmen and those younger players do kind of embrace the pressure and kind of know what's at stake. They can't get much worse than last year. So like, yeah.
Yeah, don't jinx it, but uh,
Okay.
but I tend to agree. So I've got a column that I'm working on for tomorrow, just talking about how in Aranda's time here, they've either always greatly exceeded expectations or they've, really fallen short of expectations. They haven't really ever just, flat met expectations. Like, and I don't even really know what the expectations are for this team. So that's back to that other question is what do you expect, Jerry?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just look at the roster and you can tell they're better. I just think with the pieces they've added, and bringing back a Caden Jenkins, but the pieces they've added they met specific needs. Where you brought in four offensive linemen out of the transfer portal, and you brought another one from JC. You brought in defensive help, a lot of defensive help. So. I just like what they've added, and then obviously DeQuan Finn at quarterback. You needed a guy that was going to bring a little excitement. You're bringing in a new offense. You're breaking in a new quarterback. But this is a guy that has a lot of experience, and he has played against some bigger teams. I think they played against Ohio State, so it's not like this is going to be completely foreign to him. He's seen some really good teams. And obviously an 11-win Toledo team last year. So I think that's kind of where it starts. But I expect them to be considerably better. And then, obviously with Aranda taking over more of the controls on defense, this is a guy that, I mean, when he was hired here, close to 5 years ago, that was his selling point was he's one of the greatest defensive minds in college football. And I think he's getting back to that, I think he maybe should have had more of a hands-on to begin with, but I think, he was wanting to be the head coach, the CEO, and he was letting other guys. But I think now, with the pressure on a little bit, he's taken over that, and I think that could make a big difference because Zach, when we would talk to the players, how many of them would bring that up?
Mm.
This is one of the great defensive minds, and particularly when you're talking about linebackers, man, they get pumped. This is
Mm.
Dave Aranda coaching me, so that's where I think this will be a better team. Is it a Big 12 title contender? I would say no, but this is going to be a good team, and I expect them to be in a bowl at the end of the year.
I agree, and I think that they did a great job. You mentioned some of the portal additions, kind of plugging holes, but at the same time, I think they've done an awesome job of like making the base of their team be high school recruits and
Mhm.
players that have been in Waco. Because you know we if I don't know if you watched the Florida State Georgia Tech game, but you saw what can happen to a really talented team that's primarily built through the portal. And I think that what Dave Aranda and Baylor has done very well is kind of using the portal to kind of just plug holes instead of rebuild a roster. Because it would have been easy to say after last season this whole roster needs to be rebuilt, but they didn't say that. They kind of took stock of what they had, what good players they had, and where they needed to plug holes, and they did that. They also did that on the coaching staff, built bringing in Jake Spavital and some other coaches. So I really think that this offseason they took the right approach, to kind of take that step in terms of plugging holes and kind of embracing what they had and what they needed. So I think it was all good things from the offseason.
Yeah, at the kickoff luncheon recently, Mac Rhodes was the speaker, and one of the comments he made was, "I'm not sure I've ever seen a staff crush it like these guys have crushed it over the offseason." Now, obviously, he's speaking to his base, a room full of Baylor fans, and probably, that's what they want to hear. At the same time, I didn't get the sense that Mac doesn't believe that. I think he does believe that. And that's good news. That's a positive sign. And certainly, I know Jerry probably can't talk a lot about recruits, but they've killed it
Mm.
in recruiting over the summer. I mean, they picked up some big time dudes, and so that's a credit to Aranda and his staff, and the guys that he's brought in. So things are trending up. I do tend to agree. I would say 6-6 feels like a bare minimum. I mean, I think they ought to get to that. Can they win 8 games? I mean, ask me again in a few weeks, I guess. Let's see the team play a little bit, and then I think we'll get a better handle of who this team is. But so which person, player, or position group would you say on these 2024 Bears has the most to prove?
This was an easy one, and it's the offensive line. Everything starts up front. And last year, I mean, they were Swiss cheese. I think they allowed the most sacks in the Big 12. They were, kind of putting different people, different places, everywhere. And throughout the entire season, it just didn't work. If Blake Shapen doesn't get hurt in that first game against Texas State, are we looking at a different record? Is it a totally different? Maybe, but we'll never know. So I think they did some good stuff. They brought in some really good players in the portal. Omar Egbedian, I think I'm saying his last name right, he was literally like the best guard in FCS from Montana State. And then they've been talking highly of Rylan Lingell, who's been around for a little bit, but has kind of taken his spot in the starting lineup. Um, and then you've got three returning starters who started for most of the season up front. So again, I think that with offensive line, it's kind of like you need all five fingers working together for it to actually work. And I think the only way you can actually do that is in the game. So I think there's certainly going to be a learning curve there, but for me, it's easy. It's the offensive line that they have the most to prove by far.
Jerry.
Brice, can I do that? I won't even mention the specific name, but can I do he took my answer?
What he said.
Right.
Well, and I'll say this, because that was when I saw that question, I was like, no doubt, that's that one position. But I'll kind of related to that. I'm going to put it on the running backs because that was a group that was really hyped a lot last year and just didn't get it done for whatever reason. Probably a lot because of that offensive line in front of them. But I do think there's a lot on the proving on this group because Richard Reese 2 years ago, Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year, and just really didn't get a lot of carries last year. But this is a really good group. Dawson Pendergrass, Dominic Richardson, Bryson Washington. I'm excited to see him. We only got to see a little bit of him last year, but I think he could be really, really good,
Yeah.
So, and I think this offense maybe fits these guys better. So, and I know one of the big keys in this offense, because I was talking to Nick Florence about this earlier in the week, because he played in very similar offense. And he said, it spreads everything out and it creates lanes for the running backs. But you literally, I mean, you have to run the ball for this offense to work.
Mm.
So that's why I would say, offensive line is number one, but I would say it's a lot on the running backs to prove again, too, that they're as good as all of the hype and everything.
Yeah, yeah. And so a lot of people have asked me, how Baylor's going to do this year. We get that question all the time. Probably, Jerry, you probably get it at church, just people that run into you, they want to know how Baylor's going to be. And I usually have this sort of convoluted answer that always comes to the same conclusion, which is I really don't know. But one of the things that I always kind of pass by is it all hinges on the offensive line. And I think to Jerry's point, that ties in with the running game. It ties in with protecting your quarterback so he doesn't get hurt. Um, I agree with Jerry that, those running backs did underperform probably, but they didn't always have a lot of holes to go through. And I also think, it will be nice to see an offense that maybe is not so predictable. I think, you had Baylor fans that knew on 3rd and 5 you were going to get a run, and then on 4th and 3 you were going to get a run. And when you're able to call out the play before it happens, the defense usually knows too. So, you know, it'll be nice to see maybe something a little more unpredictable. Um, so as we talked about, 6 wins will get you to a bowl game. Um, s- Starting here today, last week of August, I suspect Baylor will be favored. I mean, they are favored to beat Tarleton State. Uh, Also, probably Air Force, BYU, Houston. Um, Houston games on the road. Those others are at home. Um, Several of the other games look like toss-ups to me. And then they'll likely be underdogs in road games against Utah, Iowa State, and West Virginia. So let's say though that Baylor wins those 4 games that I mentioned that they'll be favored in. Um, what are the other games in y'all's mind that they are best equipped to win, like today? And is there a game out there where you think, yeah, they could go out and shock everyone?
We're going to start with the expert,
Please.
the legend, all that, the Connect Four champion.
How
That's
many games
right.
in a row have you seen? Other than John
420,
Morris.
427 consecutive games.
I was going to ask
Um,
you if you've ever seen a worse offensive line than last year.
oh man. Well, maybe the Kevin Steele years.
Still had some bad
Probably,
teams. Had
probably,
some,
probably worse than.
yeah.
Yeah, just looking at the schedule, Brice, I think you're right on those 4 games that, Baylor, that's their best bets to win games. But then I look at the rest of the schedule, and like you said, I think there's a lot of toss-up games. I You'd like to win at Tech on the road just because, there's a little bit of rivalry going there with Joey McGuire over there. And just for recruiting purposes and stuff, I think that would be a big win. But, as far as, one, I don't know that it's a must, but, particularly by that time it might be, but I would say TCU here. And that's a team that even when they've been really good, when Baylor has been really good, they've struggled to beat TCU. But I think that would be a big one. You've got the 2013 and 14 conference champions that are going to be honored that weekend. 61-58, that'll be in the minds of everyone. I think that would be a really big game to win. And I do agree with you though. I think there's a lot of toss-up games. There's not just a ton of games where I would say, nope, no chance. They can't win this one. Now, my shock the world is actually on your list of ones that they probably won't win. I for some reason I think they could get Utah. I know it's on the road. They're loaded. They've got Rising back. They've got a lot of weapons there. Baylor played them really well last year, and Baylor wasn't good. So,
Hmm.
and it's early in the year, before you kind of got everything going. So I think that might be a shock to the world. Now, here's my other pick for that. At the end of the season, because they're one of the picks to maybe win it, I could see them beating Kansas in the last game, just because, last year notwithstanding, they're pretty good at home, but I think that's one that who knows by the end of the year what either team is playing for, but I think that's one Kansas, one of the favorites or kind of one of the favorites to at least contend. I think Baylor could beat them in the season finale.
Okay.
You kind of took my pick there too, Jerry. What he said. I think Kansas is one. I got him winning 7 games this year, and I think Kansas is one of them. Jalen Daniels is a superstar, but
Yeah.
he hasn't been able to stay healthy for a full season. So that being at the very end of the season, I think, who knows? I don't wish injuries on anyone, but who knows how healthy Jalen Daniels is at that point in the season. I also think, that run that Jerry talked about, Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU in the middle of the season with bye weeks on either side. I think Baylor gets one of those games. It could be Oklahoma State. Maybe they shut down Ollie Gordon at home for homecoming and the defense is rolling and, and maybe it's TCU in that rivalry game. I think they get one of those 3 games. And then earlier on in the season, I think at Colorado, I think Colorado is a good team. Obviously, they have 2 of the best players in the country, but the rest of their team, I don't know how good they are, and that'll be the first Big 12 game for them. I know certainly the Baylor players are going to be up for that game going against Prime and all that. So I think they're going to win 7 games and make a bowl game. Yeah, so I think there's like a lot of optimism there. I don't think they're going to win a Big 12 championship like last year, but um, seven
So the
games I think
Utah
is
game
attainable.
would certainly, if they were to beat Utah, that would shock the country, I
Right.
think, for
Right.
sure. I'm not ruling it out. I do think that it helps that Baylor will have played a game already by the time they played Utah. Um, so I think that's good for the Bears. It's still going to be tough. I mean, that's going to be a tough place to play,
Yeah.
but um, the Colorado game, I feel like they probably won't be favored, and that speaks a little bit to just the buzziness, if that's a word, of Colorado and how everybody's just sort of all in on the Buffaloes. But I'm with you, Zach. I think that that's a game that's there for the taking. I mean, that's why I probably included it more in the toss-up category. But uh, yeah, I just think that um, the Buffaloes, they're gonna have to prove it to me a little bit,
Mhm.
Dion's team. And um there's been some weird it's been a long time, but there's been some weird Baylor Colorado games,
Mhm.
especially in Boulder, right, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the one that jumped out at me was in '91 when I think Colorado was actually the defending national champion, or it may have been a year where they shared it. But Baylor went up there, and I don't know that Baylor was a heavy underdog, but they were definitely an underdog and won it on a Jeff Ireland kick at the end of the game after Santana Dotson blocked a field goal that pretty much kind of would have clinched it. And he blocked it all the way to the other side of the field. And then I guess the other one that would come to mind would be when Joe Pa
Joe Pavelec.
made the interception in the end zone to clinch that one. So yeah, there's been some crazy games up there. But yeah, that I think that will be a good trip. And like you said, I think Colorado is a little susceptible. Man, they could get beat this week. North Dakota State is really good. And I think Colorado might be a 9 or 10 point favorite. So yeah, they've got some proving to do as well.
Yeah, no doubt. That's the kind of history that you get on a podcast that's been around since the analog computer days. Uh, so you
We
get
had to we had to dial it up.
91 is before the Big 12. So you were born, right, Zach? You were born by 91.
1990. So
Okay.
I was one
He was
year
a
old.
baby.
Yeah, yeah. I was a senior in high school in
Yeah, shut
91.
up, guys. I'm tired of hearing this. I hear this enough at home from my wife.
Well, so you guys know what's coming. I sent you a little script of the questions, but it's a little bittersweet to end this podcast, but I can't imagine not discussing it either. So a couple weeks ago, we lost our friends John and Karen Warner. Been really hard. But I think it also helps to remember the good times, and so that's what we'll do. Uh, I know the three of us all knew John and Karen different amounts of time, but I just wanted to give y'all an opportunity to share what you will remember most about the Werners. And we'll start with Zach. What do
Yeah,
you?
I knew him. I knew him the least of all of us very clearly, but I will never forget my first day at the Trib, right? My first day, his last day. We're just driving around. He's showing me all the spots. We're going to high school stadiums and MCC and all that. And then all of a sudden, he can't turn his car because he's got a flat tire. And so my first day at the Trib and his last day, we're both on our backs underneath his car trying to jack up his truck. And luckily we had another coworker come save us, and it was great. And it ended up being a good day. And went and met Jerry after that. And I
And
now in
that spoiled the
hindsight,
day.
yeah, well, I didn't say that. But in hindsight, like, I heard for my first however many months here, I heard Baylor family be like thrown around, and everybody said it. And I always thought that maybe it was just a coach speak or a marketing thing, but like um, I think what he built and who he was and his relationships that I learned that day really just embodied what Baylor family meant. And it's not just a marketing thing; it's totally real. And he kind of embodied that, and he kind of lived that. So that's what I'll remember most.
Yeah, and uh, I was on vacation when you had your first day, and so I was always grateful that John was around to, even though it was his last day, to show you around and to kind of break the ice with you, and he was happy to do it. I mean, John was just, one of the nicest guys in the world. Jerry, you knew him a long time. Y'all were very good friends. I mean, there's probably a million things you remember.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this one at the hospital when we were up there with the sisters, but John and Karen were not married yet, and we went on I guess a three-way date, afternoon movie.
Hello.
Yeah, when there's like nobody else in the. Well, Kevin Tankersley says he was there. I don't remember Kevin being there, but we'll go with that. But anyway, there was very few people in the theater, and it was just me and John and Karen and maybe a couple other people, and we were watching a horrible movie called Angel, and it was high school student by day, prostitute or stripper at night. And John and we were just laughing our butts off the whole time. Just, it was so ridiculous but Karen the whole time was, oh, that poor girl. Oh my gosh, just so sympathetic for her case. And that's the one that really resonates with me. But yeah, you're right. I mean, so many great memories really with both of them. But yeah, and then just all the road trips that I had with John, just wherever we were going. And it really continued even after I came to Baylor. We would still make a lot of trips together. And, again, I think I mentioned this up there, but he would actually have a mixed CD of the worst of the 70s, not the best, the worst of the 70s. And what's funny about that is it was actually some of my favorite songs. May speak to my music taste, but loved the duets, and he hated them, and a lot of them were on the mixed CD. So those are kind of a couple of things that I really remember about John and Karen.
Yeah, I think this will probably resonate with you guys. A few nights after they passed, I had went out with Chad and with Jason Orts, and we were reminiscing a little bit, and just thinking of different things. And at some point, I said, John and Karen were just the coolest, dorkiest people that you've ever met.
Yes.
and and I don't mean that as an insult, but they were quirky in their own way. They were they had their little quirks, but man, they were cool. They were cool. And as Jerry alluded to, John's love of music was deep, and he knew a lot. The certainly on many road trips we did the worst of the '70s thing too, and he inspired me. Okay, and so then I would come up with new ones, and I came up with the worst of the '80s and worst of the '90s, and they were pretty bad. And we would just laugh and sing, and I'm with Jerry. There were songs like John's taste is always better than ours. There was be songs like, man, I like this one.
That's right.
This
How is this one on
bad.
the worst? This can't be on the worst.
Right. We had such a great time on so many road trips. He loved food, and he and I agreed on like 99.9% of food. Restaurants, we would always want to go to the same places. But mostly I just, as an coworker, which we were a lot more than that, but I just appreciated his hard work and his dedication and his knowledge and his writing. I mean, all of it was good. He, I was listening to the retirement video that we did,
Mhm.
and David G. Campbell said something like, "You got people better than anybody I've ever known with like feature stories and stuff."
Mhm.
I just kind of want to say thanks for the great stories that you wrote over the years. You got people better than anybody I've ever known. You always had that innate ability to see the humanity in people. It was an honor working with you when I was at the Trib. It's been a pleasure reading everything that you've written since then. Have a great retirement, buddy.
Because he would sit there and he would listen. It wasn't about John, it was about the subject that he was covering.
Yeah.
So but beyond that, I mean, he was just a very, very good friend. My pastor came over and prayed with me when John passed, and I was telling John stories, and I think my pastor had actually heard a few from me before, but he humored me and just let me go. And he was like, he sounds more like a brother. And I was like, oh man, what are you doing to me here? But no, I mean, I think we loved John, we loved Karen. Certainly we'll miss them. It'll be kind of weird this season, but they will remain in our hearts. So yeah, just wanted to leave with that.
Yeah.
Appreciate y'all. We will see you on Saturday at the games, boys.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right.
See you later.
See ya.